so thrilled and excited that we have our guests here with us. They made an appearance last summer at First Presbyterian, and so maybe some of you got to see them there. I know the pastor of First Pres is here, so wave your hand. So glad that he came and joined us this morning. And we have a few other guests. If you haven't discovered the coffee down the hall here, there's a coffee station, tea and whatever. And then there's a bar. You know, we have our folks who have to go get their Bloody Marys, so if that's your thing, we're probably the only church in town after which you can have your own Bloody Mary.
German Lutherans.
What?
The Lutherans.
The Lutherans do that too?
You can go to the German club.
Oh, they go to the German. Well, but like we have our own like private bar right in the next room. Anyways, as you know, social justice has been foundation for Sacred Journeys from the moment we started, and so we have tried to bring in different social justice speakers over the years. Janan Najeeb has been here with us before. I don't know how many of you remember years ago she came and she talked about being Muslim in America, and it was a wonderful, meaningful conversation. And she also made the front page of the Milwaukee Journal Sentinel recently for standing up for her beliefs and for her rights. And I
taking on the British Empire.
Taking on the British Empire, absolutely, and the American Empire. So thrilled to have you here. I have sent out to everybody your bios, and I couldn't say all of the things you both do because there's so much that you are both involved in. And Rachel Ida is here. She's written many things, spoken many places, and I'm so impressed that the two of you have joined forces, so to speak, to help bring acceptance and understanding and inclusion and religious diversity to all of us, so that we realize that, boy, gosh, we could just all live together in peace and harmony. Wouldn't that be nice? Frankly, I think they need to let women be in charge for the next 10,000 years. So anyways, I am going to hand this over to them. They have agreed that this can be recorded, so I will post this on YouTube, and you can share it with whomever you will. But for now, can we give them a hand for being here?
Well, good morning, everyone, and thank you all for staying. I remember coming previously, and I remember it was such a lovely service and an audience. So I'm thrilled to be here again with my friend Rachel. So we're excited. I don't think the last time I spoke, I discussed much about my Palestinian heritage because I was brought in to speak more. I don't quite remember what the topic was, but more about being Muslim. But I am a Palestinian American born in Jerusalem. In some ways, I am a naturalized citizen, but in some ways, I'm a third generation Palestinian because my grandfather used to come here as a merchant, and of all places, he used to go to New York and come to Milwaukee. And at that time, we thought that's really funny. Why, of all places, Milwaukee? But what was common amongst immigrants is that they would look for community. And there was a very, very, very small Palestinian community, Palestinian Christian community. And there was, in Milwaukee, a small diner that was owned by a Palestinian Christian woman. And so she had these individuals that would come traveling and looking for traditional food. And so she'd make hamburgers for the rest of the community, and she would make Palestinian cuisine for them. And so it became a stop. And my grandfather actually died and is buried in Milwaukee. But I never met him because my father came to finish school here and to learn his trade when he was about 16 years old. And a year after arriving, his father passed away. And so he continued here with his uncle. And interestingly enough, my father, who spent the vast majority of his life in the United States and served in the Army here, he, on a visit back to the West Bank, which is the city that, in El Bira, Ramallah, which is the city that he is from, during a visit there, he passed away. and he is buried there. And that had actually always been his dream, that if he was ever, buried, that would be in his land. And so that's why in some ways I see myself as a third generation Palestinian American, although I am a naturalized citizen. I don't want to talk a lot about my history, but I think I really want to focus about what has become very real for most Americans is the last 19 months of a genocide. Because prior to that, people probably had heard about Israel, they had heard about the Palestinians. Maybe not. They didn't know that Israel was a creation of Great Britain at the time after the Holocaust. They wanted to find a home for Jews because, the racism in Europe, they still didn't want them there. And so with the Balfour Declaration, etc., they decided that, after looking at about 6-7 spots with the World Zionist Congress, including places in South America and in Africa, they decided that they were going to focus on having a homeland for the Jews in Palestine. Of course, as colonialist powers and empires do, they don't ask the indigenous population about that. And so what happened was the ethnic cleansing of over 400 villages and towns, Palestinian villages and towns, and the expulsion of another about 800,000 Palestinians in order to make way for European Jews to live in Palestine. And so a lot of times you hear things like, Israel is surrounded by all these Arab enemies. Israel isn't surrounded by Arab enemies. Israel was created in the middle of the Arab world, and so having a European colonial settler state, a settler colonialist state in the midst of the Arab world, particularly one that has often gone and attacked their neighbors, a lot of times, I say to people, if I was going to be in a neighborhood and someone comes in and says, and someone tells me that, I just want to tell you about the neighbors, the people to the right of me hate me, the people to the left of me hate me, the people in front of me hate me, the people behind me hate me, and gosh darn, everybody hates me. I'm not going to say what's wrong with the neighbors, I'm going to say what the hell is wrong with you? That would usually be the logical thing. What did you do to them that every single one of them don't like you, And so it's because of Israeli aggression. They have attacked and killed people, and they have gone into Jordan. They have gone into, over the years, they have gone into Syria. They have gone into Lebanon. They have bombed in Iran, in Iraq, in so many places that they have no business doing, but it's part of the expansion that our government has really been enabling. But for the last 19 months, I think for the very first time, most people have become very aware, and if they're not, they've been trying to learn more about what is happening. Why? Because it is the first time in history that the people who are the victims of a genocide and being ethnically cleansed are basically broadcasting their demise and their murder and their misery to the entire world. And the people that are doing it are proudly broadcasting it to the entire world. And so unlike other genocides and other wars where you have to sort of search for the war criminals and try to prove something, it's all broad as daylight. And the entire world overwhelmingly sees that and has stood with the indigenous Palestinian people. We need to keep in mind that Israel is the fourth strongest military, nuclear country, and it has nobody knows because they don't divulge it and they have never signed any treaties. It is believed that they have over 400 nuclear warheads in that small country, whereas the indigenous Palestinians don't even own a single helicopter. They don't own a single tank. They are an indigenous people that have been disarmed 76 years ago. So this is what the Palestinian people are up against. A lot of times, even yesterday, I was at an event where someone came up and said, well, you know, you need to tell Hamas to release the hostages. Because, of course, I've got Hamas on auto dial, you know. that kind of assumption is, you know, you don't see that happening with a lot of other people, but there's always that assumption that we need to answer for everybody. The thing that people don't realize is that history didn't start on October 7th, 2023. Gaza has been under siege and has been an open-air prison for decades. And just the previous 17 years alone, Israel entered and killed and massacred people 14 times in bombardments. Every year and a half or so, they go in with a policy that is known as mowing the grass. It's a well-known policy. They're proud of it. So every time the population starts to grow, they go in and they mow the grass by killing thousands in order to bring down the numbers. And it is not by chance that 70 to 80% of those who have been killed in Gaza are women and children. That's mowing the grass. That is really the ethnic cleansing, because you prevent children from becoming families and you prevent the mothers from having children. It's barbaric, it's unacceptable, and our country unfortunately is enabling it in kind of the format that an empire works. We are enabling them because they are pretty much a base for us, you know? Many people don't know that the United States has 90 bases around the world. That's not normal for countries to have 90 bases around the world. Mind you, the largest base that exists is in Iraq. Remember Iraq? Supposedly we left Iraq? No, the largest US base is in Iraq, because anywhere there are natural resources, we want to be there and we want to control them, and we don't care about how many people we kill or the indigenous people, what kind of lives they have to exist. But we'll get, you know, we'll talk a little bit more about what's been happening. I think the way that Rachel and I have known each other for years, but one of the main ways we came together was on October 8th, when we talked about the single narrative that was being presented about what's happening in Gaza. And we started the Wisconsin Coalition for Justice in Palestine. We had a press conference, I think it was on a few days later after that, and we were about 17 organizations. Now we are over 90 organizations around the state that make up Wisconsin Coalition for Justice in Palestine. And these are predominantly, you know, all kinds of groups, church groups, political groups, all types of groups that really believe that the Palestinians should have equal human rights. And I think one of the most important things that Rachel and I agree on is that we believe in a one-state solution where every human being has one vote, a democratic state. We don't need theocracies. We don't need these racist kind of states. Every human being should have a vote. And I'll pass it on to Rachel, and then we'll kind of move on that way.
Good morning, everybody. I'm Rachel Ida Buff. I am, I guess, a third generation Jewish American. My great-grandfather, my great-grandparents, and specifically my great-grandfather, who I've been doing some research about, Samuel Buff, came here in 1894, fleeing racist pogroms in Eastern Europe, which is how most Ashkenazi Jews like me wind up here. I say I'm a third generation Jewish American. I don't know if birthright citizenship goes down, and the Supreme Court has agreed to hear at least the beginning of the precepts for why they might hear eventually the case against the 14th Amendment and birthright citizenship, which was one of the Reconstruction amendments that said, what do we do with the fact that we have a population of formerly enslaved people in our country that have no rights? The 14th Amendment remedied that partially, or attempted to, by saying everyone born here is a citizenship. That is now up for grabs. And I actually don't know what either of us will be if that goes down, since I don't know. In front of you, there are flyers for the beautiful and probably huge this year, May 1st March in Milwaukee for immigrant rights. Really important if you can get up there. It's always a beautiful day, lots of speakers, lots of paleta carts, my favorite part. Lots of people will be there saying, many of us who weren't here initially, which is indigenous folks, weren't brought here against their will, which is formerly enslaved, now free African Americans. The rest of us are immigrants. And a basic thing we can say is that the harm done to one population migrates. It doesn't stick right there, right? So what we're seeing right now is all kinds of things being done in my name. In order to protect against anti-Semitism on campus, we have to get rid of these lousy pro-Palestine activists, right? Which puts people like me, when I look at Gaza, I see the Warsaw Ghetto. I see my people's history. And I think the most Jewish thing I have ever done is to get involved with Palestine solidarity work, which I've been doing now for over a decade. It took me a while because the price is high for Jews in this country. Because there has been, for example, the Anti-Defamation League. Sounds like a good idea. Who's pro-defamation, right? They have been undermining every freedom movement in this country since the 1950s, starting with the Civil Rights Movement, moving on to formations against US intervention in C-SPACE. If you're my age, you might remember the move to say, El Salvador is another Vietnam, moving towards the anti-war movement. They have been doing that, and they have been doing that in the name of Jewish safety, which makes me pretty crazy. The mainstream Jewish establishment has a lock hold on what is good, quote unquote, good for the Jews. And, I think it's very difficult for non-Jews, righteous non-Jews, and I'm including all of you, that what we call the goyim, the not us, the you guys. It's hard for you all to figure out, I don't want to be anti-Semitic, right? And what you're told is anti-Semitic, to speak frankly, is malarkey. So we had a beautiful encampment at University of Wisconsin-Milwaukee where I teach. My crew, which is Jewish Voice for Peace, and we have this wonderful Havurat Zipporah, which is a non-Zionist religious organization. We led 2 Shabbats on that encampment. People were coming up to us saying, I've never been to a Shabbat service before. This was so beautiful. There were Christians, there were Muslims, there were anarchists, there were communists. There were all kinds of people. As somebody who has taught in the UW system for 20 years now, it is the only time where I've seen my campus do what a university is supposed to do. The only time, which is be a space for people to learn from each other and change who they are, right? Yet I am told constantly that the violence of the encampment really means that the university has to clamp down on the students, has to really protect Jews. I ask, because I care, people to tell me. I have asked and asked, what happened to Jewish people that day? I've taught here for 20 years pretty happily. When I make jokes about Hanukkah bushes, people think that's a real thing, but that's not exactly anti-Semitic, right? That's just people don't really know, it's a Jewish joke. Like if you have a Hanukkah bush, I personally am intermarried. We didn't have one, but lots of my intermarried friends would have a Christmas tree and call it a Hanukkah bush, right? So people are like, where do those grow? Like, not exactly anti-Semitic, but okay. So I think that one of the most important things I can say to you all as righteous goyim today is to be very careful about what you invest in as protecting the Jews. And to me, the most important thing that I can do as a Jewish person in my own moral self-interest and in the interest of my community and in the broader interest of Jewish safety is to recognize pogroms and ethnic cleansing when I see them and stand with those who are experiencing them. Now this has cost me. I was fired from teaching Sunday school for teaching one lesson, about the Nakba. My fourth graders were rapt. You tell fourth graders, like, a lot of what you've learned might be complicated. They're like, what? Everybody hates Sunday school, probably not in your congregation. In Jewish congregations, it is the single impediment to people identifying as Jewish later in life is that everyone hates Sunday school, right? These fourth graders were literally on the edge of their seat, like, what? I showed them a video about the ruins of Palestinian villages in Israel that are now state parks, where the ruins of Palestinian villages are labeled as Roman ruins. And, any fourth grader is like, wait, what? They're not telling us the truth? Like it upends their worlds in interesting ways. I was fired the next day. Suddenly they didn't have room for a college professor spending her Sundays teaching fourth graders about Jewish stuff, right? There is a very solid organization. They have a very strong media game, so that when we issue a press release, we have to work 5 times as hard as anyone else just to calm down the editors, because if they publish something by us, we recently got an op-ed piece in the journal Sentinel that represented 6 months of organizing for me, of calling the editor, talking the editor down, explaining that Jews are diverse, that we don't all agree, that when the Milwaukee Jewish Federation, which is absolutely Zionist, they are so Zionist and they are so reactive that a Jewish colleague of mine and I are circulating a petition on campus from Jewish faculty, staff, and alums and students to say, as Jewish people, we don't agree on a lot of things. We don't agree on Palestine, but we do agree that watching our students get their visas revoked, watching our undocumented students be afraid to come to class is a terrible thing, and we want to stand with them, and we ask the administration to stand with them. We sent this to some more Zionist folks in the community, because I thought, well, this is not about Palestine, this is about our people in our neighborhoods, people in our classrooms. And I got back a response from a friend who's kind of an interlocutor. I can't speak at that community. They literally, it's nice to have this much power. People will cross the street when they see me coming. I'm like, yeah, I'm really scary. My kids like it too. People are so scared of me. I mean, hello. But I got back the response from my friend who had circulated the petition. People are so angry at what pro-Palestinian protesters have done. And again, no data. And I have done the research. There is no data to support pro-Palestinian protesters being mean to anyone on campus. They are so angry at what they have suffered at the hands of pro-Palestine protesters that they're willing to let due process go down on our campus. Like, what? This is what we call, and this is an important word also, the Israeli government, in cahoots with many organizations, Christian Zionists, Jewish Zionists, not Zionists, but interested in US empire, which Janan mentioned copiously, and that's really important. They do something called Hasbara, and it just means propaganda, right? So people, when they're like, oh, will you sign this petition saying nobody should be dragged out of their classroom or dorm, which seems like, I don't know, basic human rights. They were so angry at fictitious things that they're convinced happened that they're like, no, take them. So it's very important to think about, and I'm like, frankly, as a Jewish person, a descendant of people who fled racial violence, who my father's family migrated to West Virginia, where they confronted real live KKK activity in their city, this doesn't make me feel safe at all. And I'm somebody who stays up at night for no good reason worrying about things because I feel like that's my ethnic inheritance. This doesn't make me feel better. It doesn't make me feel safe. It terrifies me that my own people are capable of this blindness and collaboration, essentially, with what we're seeing on campus and in the world, which is fascism, right? In the name of protecting Jews. It's like a little twist. This time, instead of genociding the Jews, we're gonna elevate the Jews and then genocide everybody else. And again, don't be fooled. that what's happening to foreign-born students on our campuses can't happen to native-born people. Don't be fooled that the nursing mother they separated from her baby yesterday in Tampa in a deportation sweep, don't be fooled that that's just because she's from Honduras where there are scary gangs that we don't really know about, but those people have problems. That can happen to all of us. As a Jewish person, I'm telling you, this is how it goes. So it stuns and shocks me, and I'll shut up in a minute and we'll get back to the thing, but I'm really on this. It shocks me that my very own people can't see that our self-interest is always in solidarity. What makes us safe is standing with the most vulnerable, because we have been the most vulnerable so very often. So I am always delighted, and Janan and I have been working together 15, 20 years, really. I'm always really happy when we come do these things, because I think people are just shocked that we even like each other.
We love each other.
But you know, so yeah, should we take questions, or do you want to say some more?
Rachel, can you explain a Zionist?
Oh, thank you. That's such a good question, Pastor Kay, because I was recently reading a Signal chat, and people reported talking to non-Jews about these issues, and there was a wide misunderstanding that a Zionist is just a Jewish person. Or as my daughter said when she came up to bat mitzvah to my beautiful anti-Zionist Rabbi Brant Rosen, if we're not Zionists, how come the Torah says Israel all the time? Like, Israel, my people Israel. And I would say, like, Israel basically in Jewish means Yal, like us, the people. So there's a lot of confusion, and thank you, Pastor Kay, that's really important. A Zionist is somebody who supports Israel. There are different kinds of Zionists. There are Christian Zionists. There are cynical imperial Zionists that see Israel as useful, right? Israel is useful to Christian Zionists because basically Jews are viewed then as apocalypse fodder. Like, if we go back home, then the Messiah will come and Christians will get raptured and we'll be, I don't know, we'll be post-apocalyptic. Yeah, it's not a particularly pro-Jewish position. You know, I don't believe that when our government spends billions of our tax dollars that aren't fixing the parks and roads and paying for good schools, when it spends that money in supporting Israel, in financing the most terrifyingly high-tech war in history, where a drone can follow a journalist and not murder her on the street, follow her home and murder her when she's at dinner with the family, mowing the grass, right? Brought to you by Silicon Valley. That American investment in these things is somehow defending, you know, for Jewish Zionists, our crying need to have a homeland. And when I sit down with Jewish Zionists, which I do in the interest of, I don't know what, staying up late more often, what they say, and this is exactly what Janan says, I say, you know, this looks like a genocide to me. And they say, well, but Hamas. And I say, 70% of the people over there that have been murdered are women and children and elders. Well, but they're all Hamas. I don't even understand the math of that. Having raised children myself, at what point could they have reasonably committed to Hamas? You know, like, it's insanity, it's Hasbara, it's propaganda, it's real. You know, and there's this wall of what is called the Palestinian exception, the Palestine exception, like, you know, due process, but not for Palestinians. Freedom of speech, but not for Palestinians. Think about Mahmoud Khalil, you know, a student, but not because he's Palestinian, right? He, you know, we can get into that if you want, but the idea that we can't talk about Palestine, that our media doesn't cover Palestine, that it's wrong to talk about Palestine, that it brands you as some kind of like insane, wild-eyed radical. I've been reading a book about the university in the under McCarthyism, because it unfortunately really pertains. And in those days it was communists. They decided that communist professors were bad professors because they followed the teachings of the Communist Party, so they couldn't possibly be doing historical or chemistry. They couldn't be doing honest research because communism had messed up their brains. And I'm trying to work out, because the same thing is true now. If you've ever been pro-Palestine, or God forbid Palestinian, you can't have the rights guaranteed in our Constitution because you are somehow not to be trusted. We would accept this for no other group, right? But we have like broadly signed off, and it's not just the current administration, It's the Biden administration was terrible about this, both in terms of waging genocide and repressing students and other protesters, right? And if we lose those rights and we don't stand up for these people, and if we don't end this genocide, people are starving, not only because of the relentless bombing of civilians, but because of the incredibly cynical and cruel refusal to let aid in. Refusal to let aid in, the defunding of UNRWA and other aid offices, so people can't eat or have water or a dry and safe place to sleep. This cannot go on in any of our names.
Thanks. One thing that maybe you can also touch on, but you did, but I think it's what Rachel was talking about, the weaponization of anti-Semitism, when you use that as a weapon. And I think that all, especially Palestinian activists, have been, have been kind of charged with that if we stand up for Palestine, it's like, well, you're anti-Semitic. Well, what makes us anti-Semitic? Because we condemn a genocide, and that's what happened with the funding that my organization had for the Afghan women, was because of an op-ed that I had done in the journal Sentinel, calling Israel an apartheid state and calling for the liberation of Palestine. And I told them that I'm very proud to have written that, and I stand by every word. But immediately, suddenly you become branded anti-Semitic, and I think we need to talk about that word because as Arabs, we're Semitic. People just don't think about it that way, We are a Semitic people. But I think that fear has been imposed on Christians going back to the Holocaust, etc., and has been used as a way to silence people. And I think we need to push back. That's just not acceptable, because some of the most outspoken people against the genocide have been Jews. The people that have sat in Trump Tower, the people that closed the Grand Central Station in New York. These were all Jews, that did that, because they're saying not in my name. And I think that's really, really important for us to keep in mind, because this silencing and this chilling effect that it's having on people is what is allowing the genocide to continue. And even for those of you that did read my article last year in the journal Sentinel, where I talked about the encampment, and I said the reason that so many of the young people, the students, are on the side of, they're the ones protesting against the genocide, is because they grew up at a time and went to schools where they were being taught, the Holocaust happened because people didn't stand up. Apartheid South Africa was because people didn't stand up, etc. So now genocide is unfolding in real time under their noses, and they're being told, shut up, be quiet, that's anti-Semitic, don't say anything. So I think this is something that requires a movement that we cannot be silent about.
Yeah, and I think that you all have a really important role to play here, which is